Hello everybody, welcome to Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today I'm talking about the new album from Monolake, VLSI. Monolake is the alias for German techno ambient veteran Robert Henke, as well as Ableton founder Gerard Birles early on, but he no longer participates in the project. Also, sorry for butchered pronunciations as usual. And I'm just gonna put this out there, I'm a huge fan of Monolake. Before I got into his stuff, I was having difficulty getting into certain styles of music. Believe it or not, I think Monolake was kind of what finally pushed me into understanding ambient music. Something about Monolake caught my ear, and once I figured out how to enjoy him, so many doors and possibilities opened up for me to check out new music. His stuff led me to figure out sometimes you don't always need melody or kind of human presence for music to connect with me. I loved how his music just had this unique atmosphere to it that made his repetitive but slowly evolving beats so easy to get lost in and return to for repeat listens. Believe it or not, I couldn't even get into the Orb before I'd heard Monolake. Although in my defense I started with Orbis Terrarum, and that one's not an easy one to wrap your head around on the first couple of lessons anyway, so... But still, Monolake had a huge impact on the way I listen to music. The thing about Monolake is though, while my enjoyment of his music opened up so many doors for me, I kinda left him by the wayside for some reason. He was a big stepping stone for me. I had my one period in high school where I just lived and breathed Monolake for about a month. But I don't really know what happened after that. I just kinda moved on after the Ghosts album dropped, and while I did like that album, I don't know, could just be that it's been 4 years and I've moved on to other stuff. But point is, with the release of this new album, I finally got the push I needed to get back into him and really remember how brilliant some of this stuff was. I could absolutely do a series on Monolake, but in the meantime, I'll just go down his discography so far. Classic, also probably the most relaxing album in the catalog. Classic. Also, my personal favorite Monolake album. Although this one is not far behind Interstate, also a classic and seriously overlooked one at that. Admittedly not quite as good as the previous three, but it's definitely got its moments. Basically the darker and more industrial version of Gravity that just so happens to be better in every way. This album was what turned my eyes in Monolake's direction, mainly thanks to the track Pipeline. I'm not entirely sure if it's a classic, but it's right up there with his best. A much more seamless and atmospheric album than his past couple. Took a while to grow on me, but still definitely worth your time. This one's certainly interesting, easily his creepiest outing to date, and that's really saying something. But I don't know, I never got into this one that much as the others. Still good though. So yeah, Monolake's track record has been remarkably solid. Sure, there were some bumps in the road, but even Gravity and Ghosts I still find myself returning to every now and then, and still enjoying them, the latter mostly being pulled out around Halloween, because of course. I wasn't really sure what I was going to get out of this new Monolake album, but after Henke tweeted out that it'd be a mix of both the old and the new, both the lush and warm feel of his earlier releases, but also the micro-editing of some of the more recent ones, I got really dang excited. I avoided his more recent EPs as I had a feeling they'd have some inclusion on this new album, and sure enough, 6 of the 11 tracks on this album are previously released, albeit remixed slightly for the album proper. But I didn't hear any of those tracks because I didn't want any spoilers. Anyway, I plopped on VLSI with high expectations. How did it turn out? The answer is kind of difficult for me to put my finger on, but overall definitely positive. I was thinking of comparing it to one of his other albums, but none of them really seem to connect to this. It's got some elements of several different albums and is still very much in typical Monolake territory, but it's not quite like anything he's done to date. The closest match we have, I think, would be Polygon Cities, which did have actual melodies, some of which were actually really good. But at the same time, there was a really dark and foreboding atmosphere that just enveloped everything. VLSI is similar in that regard, but not quite as dark, so I guess maybe in the cinemascope direction a little bit. But it also has some fairly similar percussion patterns and tones to that of his previous album, Ghosts. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I seem to recall from somewhere that Silence and Ghosts were supposed to be the first 2 volumes of a trilogy, which would make this the 3rd volume. And honestly, if that's true, then yeah, this is probably my favorite album in said trilogy. I think the main thing that sticks out about this album that sets it apart from the others is how seamless it is. While the songs do in fact have all their separate identities, I get the feeling that songs were engineered to blend together. Well, alright, Silence kinda did this as well, but whatever. There have been a few listens of this album when everything felt like one continuous piece, even though it wasn't even a true continuous mix. I'll do my best to describe it going down track by track. It all starts with tone setter Erit, which has lots of the usual tight techno beats and some nice ambient pads here and there, and some edited cymbal noises for texture, kind of reminding me of Ghosts. Inwards is completely ambient, amorphous blend of synth harmonies. Crash calls back to the Gravity and Momentum days, being entirely percussion driven, with some spooky atonal ambience here and there. LogC, or LogC, let's go with LogC, starts out more ambient, starting out with the same atonal textures as the previous track, but then developing into something else entirely, ending up one of the more interesting and engaging beat-centric tracks, with some cool melodies sprinkled around. And then there's Geometry Engine, which, despite not having a melody, keeps me totally engaged with its weird and warped beat, and whooshing, unpredictable industrial noises. P.O. is kind of interesting in that its melody is carried by what seems to be pitched 808 percussion. Actually kind of reminds me a bit of the earlier Monolake track Gecko from Interstate in that regard. Error is another ambient piece. Much darker, more intense than Inwards, although no less engaging. Definitely a track I can recognize at a distance, even when not paying close attention. Dystopia has some pretty intense synth stabs, and the percussion reminds me of tracks like Remotable from Cinemascope. The melodies do become a little more upfront near the end, with tracks like Unit and Nmos, the former being notable for this interesting scratchy percussion that gives it an odd ethnic flavor. I think it's like a guiro or something like that, as well as melodies that kind of remind me of some stuff near the end of that new Outtaker album. And the latter being notable for some cool vocal effects being glitched up into a million pieces. The album ends with Glypnir, which actually also kind of reminds me of like Outtaker and LSEC 1 through 5. In particular, the final track on that album, Onium, with its intense, fluttery melodies all blending together in one ambient piece, albeit much more structured, including a beat led by intense, acid house influenced bass lines rather than the usual percussion. So, overall, I think this was worth a 4-year wait. Well, I'll admit nothing on here really stuck in my head, and often fell in the background due to all the beat-heavy tracks being in the same tempo. When I have my brain turned on, I get much more out of it, almost kind of like an IDM album. And I suppose the not remembering every single thing that happens could also just be due to the fact that I haven't listened to it nearly as much as the earlier Monolake albums, but whatever. Either way, there's a little bit of everything for Monolake fans on this one. The more atmospheric techno, more melody-driven stuff, the cool ambient passages, thoroughly enjoyable album, and definitely worth your time. I'm overall feeling a solid 8 out of 10. But of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.